Hi everyone, welcome to History Heroes, where we explore the lives and achievements of some of the most influential figures in history. Today we're going to talk about Martin Luther King Jr., a civil rights activist who delivered some of the most memorable speeches in American history. Let's take a look at his biography and some of his famous speeches that changed the world. Martin Luther King Jr. was born in Atlanta, Georgia on January 15, 1929. He came from a family of Baptist ministers and grew up in a segregated society. He was a brilliant student who graduated from high school at the age of 15 and earned his bachelor's degree from Morehouse College in 1948. He then studied theology at Crozer Theological Seminary and Boston University, where he received his doctorate in 1955. In 1954, he became the pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. He soon became involved in the civil rights movement, which aimed to end racial discrimination and segregation in the United States. He led the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955 to 1956 after Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger. The boycott lasted for 382 days and resulted in the Supreme Court ruling that segregation on buses was unconstitutional. In 1957, he founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, an organization that coordinated nonviolent protests and civil disobedience campaigns across the South. He traveled across the country and abroad, giving speeches and meeting with other leaders and activists. He also wrote several books and articles expressing his vision of justice and equality. One of his most famous speeches was "I Have a Dream," which he delivered on August 28, 1963, at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. This was one of the largest demonstrations in U.S. history, with more than 250,000 people attending. In his speech, King called for an end to racism and appealed to the ideals of democracy and freedom. He said, "I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." This speech is considered one of the most powerful and influential speeches in American history. It inspired millions of people to join the civil rights movement and fight for their rights. It also influenced many other activities around the world, such as the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa and the human rights movement in China. Another speech that King gave was Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence, which he delivered on April 4, 1967, at Riverside Church in New York City. In this speech, he denounced the Vietnam War as a moral tragedy that violated human dignity and wasted lives and resources. He also criticized the U.S. government for supporting oppressive regimes and neglecting the needs of its own poor people. He said, "A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. We are called to speak for the weak, for the voiceless, for victims of our nation, and for those it calls enemy. We must move past indecision to action. We must not engage in a negative anti-communism, but rather in a positive thrust for democracy." This speech was very controversial at the time, as many people accused King of being unpatriotic and radical. He lost some of his supporters and allies, who thought he should focus only on civil rights issues. However, he remained steadfast in his conviction that peace and justice were inseparable. The last speech that King gave was "I've Been to the Mountaintop," which he delivered on April 3, 1968, at Mason Temple in Memphis, Tennessee. He was there to support the sanitation workers who were on strike for better wages and working conditions. He spoke about the history of the civil rights movement and urged his listeners to continue the struggle with nonviolence and solidarity. He said, "Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, But it really doesn't matter to me now because I've been to the mountaintop. And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. This speech turned out to be prophetic, as King was assassinated the next day by James Earl Ray, a white supremacist. He was shot while standing on the balcony of his motel room. He was only 39 years old. His death sparked riots and protests across the nation, but also led to the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, which banned discrimination in housing and public accommodations. His legacy lives on in the hearts and minds of millions of people who admire his courage and wisdom. He is widely regarded as one of the most outstanding leaders and heroes in history. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964 for his nonviolent resistance to racial oppression. He is also the only non-president to have a national holiday in his honor in the U.S., which is celebrated on the third Monday of January every year. We hope you enjoyed this video about Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more videos about history heroes. Thank you for watching.